Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. Agentic automation isn't just the next step in automation, it's the future of how work gets done. By enabling intelligent, autonomous agents to take action, adapt, and collaborate, organizations are unlocking new levels of productivity, growth, and customer delight. Join us as we explore how agentic automation is reshaping work for the better, for customers, employees, shareholders, and most importantly, you. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of agentic automation, subscribe now. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. I'm your host, Michael Marchuk.
And I'm Brad Hairston.
And we are so glad you are joining us for the weekly pulse check of AI and automation news. As we do every week, we cover a few articles, and this week is no different. We are going to start off with an article from the Times of India, probably a publication you receive at your home, Brad. The article's titled, "The Quiet Unease Beneath the AI-Led Hiring Boom, Why 80% of People Feel Unprepared for Work in 2026. Do you feel that way?
I feel like I have a lot of work to do, but I don't necessarily feel unprepared. But I understand the point the article's making, and I did think it was an interesting read. So they are referring to some LinkedIn research that says 80% of people feel unprepared to find a job, and then the other side of that is recruiters report that most recruiters say, 2/3 of them say that finding quality talent has been harder, and it just is getting even harder as we speak. So the survey,
why do you think that is?
Well, the survey.
Why do you think that is?
The survey is pointing to AI as a big culprit, and this unease, really reflects what you and I've been talking about. We've had articles on this subject ad nauseum, but there's also a guy in the market, an HR expert named Josh Bersin, and he talks about this. He calls it the skills half-life, and how it's collapsed. Used to be you'd have technical skills that you develop that would remain relevant for 10 to 15 years. Now the is like 5 years, and AI is continuing to shrink that down. It may be 2 to 3 years before too long. So the anxiety out there, it's certainly harder to find a job than ever. AI makes the process more convoluted. There's fake job postings. We've talked about that. There's been articles about that. But you also have just the issue of workers are realizing that skills that they've fine-tuned and developed are increasingly becoming less relevant. And we have what some are calling kind of a tool-rich, skills-poor environment, and that's a bad combination. So so AI and technology disruption in general, I think, is definitely a big reason, or the main reason. And I think the way things are headed, it's probably just going to get exacerbated, because the survey that they reference in the article says 93% of recruiters plan to increase the use of AI. And that's causing the other challenge that we have seen, which is, how do you write a resume or fill out a job application in a way that it's going to appeal to a machine versus a human? And there's an art to that, and some people are doing it well and others are not doing it so well. And so you have this anxiety in general around applying for jobs, and am I talking to a human or an AI agent, or am I never getting to a human because I'm not appealing to the logic or the algorithm behind the resume or the application. So all of this combined, I to me is just evidence that yes, there is unease, and people are, especially those that are unemployed. It's obvious why they feel unprepared or unable maybe to land that right job. And this environment that we're in is just continuing to swirl and make it more difficult for them. Even more startling than all of that, though, from the article, the thing that stuck out to me was the LinkedIn survey suggests that right now, more than half of all people globally are actively looking for a new role. Did you see that?
That's huge.
That's shocking to me. That sounds like,
Honestly, well, here we are. That means that either one of us then would be looking for a new role.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is crazy to think that 1 out of 2 people, that's a lot.
It's a lot.
Why do you think that is? What's the root behind that?
I don't know. I mean, it could be they asked a question in a way that would, make it score so high. In other words, are you even thinking about other possibilities, beyond what you're doing today? And most people would say, sure, that comes to mind.
Yeah,
that's different
true.
than
How you ask the question.
I'm out looking, actively looking, and that's the way it was worded, is that half of all people employed are actively looking for a new role. I mean, that sounds like the pandemic. That sounds like what we saw in the pandemic, and then it even went beyond the pandemic, and we had a lot of people moving jobs and the remote work versus, got to come into the office, that whole saga.
Right.
So yeah, I don't buy into it. It certainly caught my attention. But other than, I think AI and technology disruption is creating a lot of new opportunities. It doesn't mean that they're, without risk. I mean, there's a lot of AI startups, and more every day are getting launched. And so a lot of people that are working at, companies that are more established, that have a history, they see these startups and they can get recruited away pretty easily, because they're offered options, or they love the allure of going to work for something that is just now starting, and you want to be part of building a business and what have you. And I don't know what the official statistic is on how many of those companies fail, but I know it's high. I know it's got to be high. So,
yeah.
But yeah, for a certain segment of our population, that's going to be really attractive, and for others, not so much. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I think
speaking of some of the hiring, though, our next article kind of goes into even more that we've seen the unease with the hiring market, yet the data says something different. So this is from Market Watch on MSN, and it says the U.S. economy's secret weapon surges in the third quarter, raising hopes of AI payoff. There were some pretty impressive numbers that were in this article talking about the growth and the drop in unemployment rate over that time. Now, this is just the U.S., so obviously this is only a snapshot of the entire global economy. But it's pointing to a slightly different picture with the data than we're hearing from these other anecdotal observations. Can you walk us through this?
Yeah, this is one of those positive articles about, hey, maybe AI and all the innovation with technology, maybe it is having some positive impact on the economy, at least in the US, from what we can tell. So this article focuses on worker productivity, specifically that metric, and it has definitely surged from over the summer and the early fall of last year. And this essentially means that on average, workers produced more goods and services per hour worked than they did in the past. So it's not about individuals working harder per se. It's more about the overall efficiency of the labor force, across the U.S. economy. So
Right.
the pace is definitely the growth and productivity. The pace has been higher than it's been in 2 years, and some people are pointing to the tariffs and saying, well, most companies are reluctant to pass that cost along to their consumers. So they're using automation and AI and finding other ways to reduce hiring, to offset the cost of that. It is worth noting, though, that there's I found another resource that talked about at Stanford. They've done research around the lag between disruption and the measurable productivity gain. And this research, at least one example, found that it takes a little longer than what we've seen. It could be as long as 5 to 10 years before you see measurable, identifiable improvement in productivity. And so that would suggest that what we're seeing last year may have been the result of things that happened back in 2019 or 2020 or whatever. And that's
Right.
that's prior to the arrival of ChatGPT, even, if you think about it. So there is, there's another school of thought that whatever it is that's driving productivity, it's great. We hope it continues. Maybe it's AI. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a culmination of other things. But, potentially, this could suggest that you can see economic growth without requiring, proportionately more labor. I mean, I think that's one way to construe this article and the research behind it. And, who knows? Maybe we're even underestimating the impact of AI. Because it's such a nuanced thing when you have AI agents that are doing things like writing code, things like that. I mean, there's a productivity impact, there's a quality impact. There's multiple ways to look at it. So I think it was interesting to me that this article was laser focused on productivity. And then how you dissect that and how you interpret that is there's multiple ways to do it, as we see from this research. So pretty interesting comment on what's going on.
So talk about interesting comments of what's going on. So we have people who are concerned about the jobs, another set of data that supports that there's maybe a healthier job growth than we thought. And now we have a different kind of viewpoint of how a job may be being, I guess it's being supported in a different way. This one's from Medical Economics, and the article is titled, Utah Let AI Refill Chronic Prescriptions in State-Backed Pilot Program. Now, we've talked about this in the past, having, we say healthcare is a really big opportunity for AI. We've seen it with the x-rays and the other support for schedules and that sort of thing. This is actually getting down to patient care, using AI directly for refilling prescriptions. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, it's nice to know that you subscribe to Medical Economics. I really
don't we all?
Didn't know that was part of your repertoire, but I mean, it's a fascinating piece. I mean, Utah is essentially allowing an autonomous AI platform to renew certain maintenance medications for patients with chronic conditions, which includes hypertension, diabetes, and thyroid disease. And I might know someone who has all three of those conditions. But I live in Texas, not in Utah, so I can't benefit from this. But the company behind it is called Doctronic, and this is an AI that has the ability to manage the lower risk, high volume tasks like refills and such. And the idea is by doing this, you're enabling the physicians to devote more time to, complex care, conversations with patients that require their clinical judgment, things like that. So there's no doubt that we have a physician shortage, and Utah this article has cited that as well. It's also a fact that it's getting longer and longer to get that first appointment with a doctor if you need a prescription refill. And so it's really, it comes down to, can we take these lower risk transactional type things, even in healthcare, and can we put the right constraints around it, the right guardrails, and allow AI to do something that we shouldn't bog the doctors down with? And, I know Microsoft's CEO has been talking about this.
Microsoft's CEO?
Oh. Well, he hadn't been talking about it with me, but he's been talking about it in the market, and he's written a book, and but he talks about this idea of narrow agentic AI. That the
right.
first wave of truly autonomous AI agents are going to handle the bureaucratic stuff, and even in medicine. And so this could be a really good example of that, and it's got to be regulated the right way. You don't want an agent, over prescribing or under prescribing a patient, and then that leads to more serious health issues or death, or that's the potential downside. So it has to be carefully regulated, and the article talks about.
That sounds like one of those things they voice over very quickly on the ads I always see on TV in terms of the potential side effects for the medicines.
Yeah, exactly. Those are always a little bit funny, just all the things they talk about, the side effects. It's like, there's no need for me to check it out now after I've heard that long list. So
the article though does mention that this one does mention that there are some safety checks in place, at least for initially. Can you go through those?
Well, they're requiring doctors to review what the AI, prescribes, for lots and lots of initial rounds of this. So there's some of that's going on, and then they've got other. I don't have the article up in front of me, but there were other things that they were doing to make sure that this works the right way, and that it's not, even in the trial period, it's not causing any risk to any patients that are involved in the program. So by focusing on
there are some hoops they have to jump through in order to be able to get there in terms of who's able to leverage this particular service. There's a very select number of medications that are also part of that, and Doctronic requires that physicians actually review the first 250 refill requests per drug category. So, for folks who are getting chronic conditions, you talk about high blood pressure and whatnot. Your blood pressure medicine, generally speaking, is not going to change until a doctor makes that change. So you run through your 30, 60, 90 days of supply, and then you get another supply of the same thing because nothing's really changed. You're just continuing to take it. So this could offload that. But even in those kind of situations where it should be a rubber stamp, at least Doctronic is having people take a look at this before they move forward with it. So I think it's an interesting idea. We'll have to see how it goes. But obviously, some people are for it, and some people are really vehemently against it. So we guess we'll have to see how that goes.
It'll be a long time before they're handing, pain medication prescriptions like opioids and such.
A very long time.
AI. Don't think that is going to happen anytime soon. But kudos to Utah.
They're a very long time.
One of the most beautiful states in the U.S. I know you agree with me, and now we can talk about how innovative they are in AI as well. So good job.
Exactly. So, the next article we have in here is from the BBC. And this is from one of the largest companies in the world, NVIDIA. It unveils self-driving car tech as it seeks to power more products with AI. Now, when I think of self-driving cars, the very first company that comes to mind is Tesla. And I know there are others out there like Waymo and others that have built it into, say, self-driving taxis and stuff like that. But now NVIDIA is getting into the game with this. What do you think their play is on this?
It's funny you mentioned Tesla, because when I read this article, the first thing I thought about was Elon Musk. You know, NVIDIA's CEO seems to be following Elon's lead in terms of getting involved in everything, right? Getting in the middle, finding a way to get in the middle of everything going on in the market. And self-driving cars, we've been stuck in this mode forever. It seems like it's always like, oh, they're 5 years off. Oh, they're 5 years off. To me, this article, first and foremost, it points to, I think, the automotive industry's confidence in AI autonomy, and that, this is legit. Like, this is really going to sweep across the country. And we've already seen Waymo and now Tesla making big strides in that last year. So now NVIDIA, I think, is no doubt saying, hey, we want to get involved in this before all these long-term partnerships get formed and what have you. And so I don't know if anyone, if this was a total shock to everyone working with NVIDIA. I had never heard them mentioned in the self-driving car realm, but they have been developing a system that brings reasoning to autonomous vehicles, and sounds like they're working with Mercedes to get a driverless car out in the US sometime in 2026, and then they're gonna do the same in Europe and Asia. So clearly they're not just selling chips anymore. I mean, they kind of feel like Apple. It's like, okay, we control the hardware and the silicone and the software, and now we want to control the end-to-end solution. And so by pushing themselves in there and saying, we want to be the infrastructure provider for every, AI application domain. I mean, they're certainly, they've proven how aggressive they can be in the chip space, but even that space is becoming more commoditized. And we saw last year evidence of that, other companies making strides and looking to different providers, not just the default of NVIDIA. So, So yeah, I'm intrigued to hear about this, and we'll watch this story carefully as it unfolds this year. And I guess I'll keep a watch out for Mercedes, zooming by me on the highway with no driver, or at least a driver sitting there not doing anything, like with a Tesla. But I'm very, very interested to see that NVIDIA is putting their name in the hat here.
Yeah, and to your point, I think where we see a lot of these crossovers are, and Apple controls its hardware very, very carefully and its software very, very carefully, which then allows it to create a platform for these other applications. And I see NVIDIA kind of inching its way over to the application of its hardware in various formats, whether it's a self-driving car or perhaps even a humanoid robot, which they've discussed as well. So we've got interesting concepts on how NVIDIA is trying to extend and expand its influence in the various areas where its hardware could be taken advantage of. So I think it's a very interesting concept.
Yeah.
So speaking of pushing past things, we talked about a lot this episode on jobs, whether you're kind of squeamish about the job situation, whether you're bullish in the jobs because we've got some good job data coming out, where we see jobs being transitioned from humans to artificial intelligence for prescriptions. This one says it all in the title. From the Economic Times, the article's titled, "Done with Human Hirings." Godfather of the software as a service, Jason Lemkin, has replaced most of his sales team with AI agents. Now, we've seen companies go down this path before and reel things back. What's going on
Mhm.
here?
Yeah, there's no reeling back yet. But this is a fairly recent event with Jason Limkin, according to the article. For those that don't know him, he is considered the godfather of SaaS. He's a big time investor as well. He's invested in hundreds of SaaS companies, and last year he made a huge shift to he's using a team of 20 AI agents in place of a team that was formerly staffed by 10 human sales reps and account reps. And he made that transition in like 6 to 7 months. So it was a pretty rapid one. And, according to the article, he's been very happy with it. I mean, the economics are insanely positive in terms of what he's getting for what he's paying. And, I think it's when someone does something like this, there are examples, like you said, Michael, there have been CEOs that have done it, and some of them have had to dial it back. Limkin's doing it on a smaller scale, but when he does it and he makes a big public admission of doing it, I think it's significant, because a lot of people seem to follow his lead and look at him as the voice of authority on SaaS and SaaS at scale. And so we should expect that there will be some kind of cascade effect from this. There may be a lot of smaller SaaS companies that try out what he's doing. I'm not talking about companies with 500 salespeople, but maybe similar to him, 10 to 15 to 20 salespeople, and trying to replace that with agents. But I think it is pretty interesting, and it kind of also reinforces a trend that, and it's almost like the medical story we just covered, where you take the lower risk, lower touch, higher volume kind of things that you can afford to automate and give over to AI, and reserve the stuff that's more strategic, or in the case of medicine, where you need more empathy, you need more personal touch. And you can apply that same thing to sales. There's a lot of transactional sales that are, low touch, very transactional, especially when you're talking about the SMB market. And that's stuff that you could give to AI agents with little to no risk. But the more strategic sales, enterprise deals, complex solutions, you're going to need more relationship building, more strategy, more human touch, empathy, political, the ability to navigate politics, all those things that agents are just not good at. So I think, maybe this contributes to kind of the polarization of sales, where you have agents doing all this, and then you have the reduced enterprise sales, more strategic sales. So the middle layer is kind of going away. And I do think in this case, we're not talking about augmentation. We are talking about replacement. So I think for sales,
what are your thoughts on so selling a software as a service kind of thing has perhaps a defined target audience? Do you think that the sales agents in this case here would be something that's very restricted to a particular type of industry where people are used to that? Because I can't imagine sales moving more towards AI agent when people are the ones that tend to make the buying decisions and want to ask questions.
Yeah, I do think it's going to gravitate to the smaller, less complex deals where the buyer doesn't even think that they need a human to deal with, or they're fine interacting with a chat bot or whatever. I mean, I think about when I did Christmas shopping, and I would have these chat bots, more intelligent chat bots, coming at me, and while I was on a site looking at something, and I was fine leveraging them as long as they were good and they were answering my questions, making suggestions, and so it's only in rare situations that like, oh, I need to talk to a human, get me to a human agent. And so I it's possible that it's a similar thing here. I think it may be more pertinent, as you said, in certain industry sectors. There are some that I think you have to have heavy expertise at your disposal, when you're talking about a product or service, and it's more than you can get from interacting with an agent, or you need to go deeper than what they're able to provide. So, I think, the article didn't break it down too much further into what types of sales the agents are doing versus the humans, but he's definitely, handed the keys to these agents, and he said that this is what I'm doing going forward, and he seems to be pleased with the results. So I think if I'm in sales, if I'm in SaaS sales, I think it's a bit of a wake up call, not a new wake up call, but it's a call to say, which side are you on? Are you building skills, for the future? Are you going to be part of helping on the agentic side, or are you going to be, more the strategic kind of enterprise sales, in that kind of role where human involvement is essential. Both sides require skill development on an ongoing basis. I don't think anyone can sit tight and just, bank on their skills from 5 to 10 years ago. But sales certainly is going through some disruption here, which we kind of knew would happen.
Yeah, we would. We've seen this kind of going through. We've seen marketing be impacted. We've seen a lot of different roles within organizations be impacted. But there's always opportunity for people to leverage these new tools in ways to make them more productive and make the company more productive overall, while not necessarily devastating the whole job market. So, well, that's all we got for today. We've gone through a lot, again, about jobs. It seems like the jobs episode today. But there's a lot of stuff going on with AI as we are starting off 2026 here. So anyway, appreciate you all for joining. And as you know, we have a great guest every week that comes on to give us more input and outstanding advice and insights from their expertise. And so we ask you join us for those as we go. And please join us next week for another Pulse Check. See you then.
Thanks for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of agentic automation, subscribe now. The future of work is here.